The email notification popped up on my screen at 6:37 a.m. Carmichael Industries announces leadership transition. There was my father's face, beaming beside the CEO, champagne flutes raised in a toast. The caption read, "Join us in celebrating Thomas Bennett's 35 years of excellence as he passes the torch." Everyone from the family was tagged in the photos. Everyone except me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Alexandra Bennett. I'm the eldest daughter of Thomas Bennett, engineering director at Carmichael Industries for over 3 decades. Or as my family refers to me, the one who left, the difficult one, the one who chose career over family. I stared at the screen, coffee growing cold beside me, as I scrolled through the comments section. "Looking forward to the retirement gala," wrote my brother Michael. "Dad deserves nothing but the best celebration," added my sister Vanessa. Neither had bothered to mention it to me during our perfunctory monthly calls. I set my phone down and gazed out at the Manhattan skyline from my corner office. The irony wasn't lost on me. For the past 9 months, I had been in final negotiations with Carmichael's board of directors. Tomorrow, I would be announced as the new president and chief operating officer of the very company my father had dedicated his life to, the company that had been the source of so much tension between us for years. When I left our small town of Ridgemont 12 years ago with nothing but a business degree and relentless ambition, my father had looked at me with disappointment. "The corporate world will chew you up and spit you out," he warned. "You're turning your back on the family legacy." The family legacy being that Bennett's worked at Carmichael, not ran it. Bennetts were loyal employees, not visionary leaders. I picked up my phone again and called Olivia, my best friend since college and the only person who truly understood the complexity of my relationship with my family. "Did you see the announcement?" I asked when she answered. "I just did," Olivia replied. "They really didn't tell you about the retirement party?" "Not a word. Apparently Emily from Dad's department got an invitation, but his firstborn daughter didn't make the cut." Olivia sighed. "Are you surprised?" I wasn't, but the ache was familiar and sharp. 12 years of success, and they still see me as the daughter who abandoned ship. "What are you going to do? The board announcement isn't until next week, right?" I stared at the email again. The retirement gala was scheduled for Friday evening at the Grand Meridian Hotel, 3 days before my official introduction as Carmichael's new president. "I'm still deciding," I said finally. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and pulled up the quarterly projections I'd been working on. In the 12 years since leaving home, I had methodically climbed the corporate ladder at Westridge Partners, one of the country's top management consulting firms. I had led the restructuring of failing companies, orchestrated mergers worth billions, and developed a reputation as the person you called when impossible situations needed fixing. What my family didn't know, what I had never told them, was that for the past 2 years, I had been Carmichael's secret weapon. Hired by the board to analyze their operations and chart a path forward as their aging leadership approached retirement, I had spent countless hours poring over the company's financials, visiting their manufacturing plants, and interviewing employees, always careful to avoid my father's department. "Bennett," came a voice from my doorway. It was James Harlow, my mentor and the managing partner at Westridge. "Ready for the Carmichael transition meeting?" I nodded, gathering my files. "Just finishing the last projections." James studied me. "Something's bothering you. My father's retirement party is this Friday. I wasn't invited." He raised an eyebrow. "Does he know about your new position?" "No one in my family does. The board agreed to keep it confidential until the formal announcement." James leaned against the doorframe. "So you're about to become president of the company where your father spent his entire career, and he has no idea?" "That's about the size of it," I confirmed. "That's what makes you formidable, Alexandra," James said. "You turn rejection into strategy. Most people would have run from their father's company, but you're about to run it." Later that afternoon, I found myself driving through the industrial district where Carmichael's headquarters stood, a sprawling complex of offices and manufacturing facilities where I had spent countless hours as a child. My father would bring me on weekends, proudly showing me the machinery, introducing me to his colleagues. "This is my Alex," he'd say. "Smartest kid you'll ever meet." That pride had turned to confusion, then disappointment when I announced I was leaving for New York instead of accepting the management trainee position he'd arranged for me at Carmichael. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I parked across the street and watched employees streaming out at the end of the workday. Some faces I recognized, most I didn't. 12 years was a long time. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Vanessa. Mom wants to know if you're coming home for Dad's birthday next month. Not a word about the retirement party happening this week. I set the phone down without responding. That evening, I called Robert Chen, Carmichael's chairman of the board. Is everything set for next Monday's announcement? I asked. All ready, Robert confirmed. The executive team is excited to welcome you officially. Your father's retirement party is going to be quite the affair. The board spared no expense. So I've heard, I said dryly. There was a pause. He doesn't know you're coming, does he? He doesn't know I'm coming because I wasn't invited, I clarified. And he certainly doesn't know I'm taking over. Another pause. Alexandra, the board assumed you'd handle the family communications. That wasn't our place. And I assumed my father would have the decency to invite his daughter to his retirement celebration, I countered. Looks like we were both wrong. After hanging up, I poured myself a glass of wine and walked to the window of my apartment. The city lights blurred as I let myself remember the last time I'd spoken to my father about my career. It was Christmas. 5 years ago. I had just been promoted to partner at Westridge Consulting. My father had scoffed. Telling other people how to run their businesses when you've never run one yourself. I've helped turn around companies that were failing, I had defended. But you haven't built anything, he replied. You swoop in, make your recommendations, and then move on to the next client. There's no loyalty in that. My mother had intervened. Then, changing the subject to Michael's new position in Carmichael's sales department. The conversation had moved on, but the damage was done. I left the next morning, cutting my visit short. We'd spoken only in brief, superficial conversations. Since. My phone rang, startling me from the memory. It was Olivia again. I've been thinking about Friday, she said without preamble. You should go. To a party I wasn't invited to? Exactly. Walk in there with your head held high. Let them see what they've been missing. I took another sip of wine. It would certainly make for an interesting evening. You've spent 12 years proving your father wrong, Olivia continued. Maybe it's time he knew it. The next morning, I received another email, this one from the event planner handling my father's retirement gala. The subject line read, Carmichael Industries Leadership Transition, Gala Final Approval. It was addressed to several board members and included me as the incoming president. The message contained the finalized program for the evening, cocktail hour, dinner, speeches from colleagues, a video tribute, and the presentation of a retirement gift. I scrolled through the attached seating chart. My mother was at the head table with my father. Michael and Vanessa were seated nearby with their spouses. No place for me. At the office, James caught me staring at the seating chart. Planning your grand entrance? He asked. Something like that, I replied. You know, he said carefully, your father's generation had a different concept of success. For them, it was about loyalty to one company, climbing the ranks slowly, putting in the time. And my generation? Your generation understands that impact matters more than tenure. That innovation often requires disruption. He studied me. Have you considered that your father might actually be proud of what you've accomplished, if he knew the full story? I shook my head. He's had 12 years to ask. Not once has he shown interest in my work. Then show him, James said. Simply. That afternoon, I called Robert Chen again. I need a favor, I said. I'd like to attend my father's retirement gala, but I wasn't on the guest list. There was an awkward silence. Alexandra, as the incoming president, you're certainly welcome to attend. I know what you assumed, I cut in. But I'd like to attend without announcement. I'll reveal my new position when the time is right. As you wish, Robert said. I'll have the event planner add you to the list. Will you be bringing a guest? I thought of Olivia. Yes, I will. After hanging up, I texted my friend, free Friday night? I need moral support for a family ambush. Her reply came instantly, wouldn't miss it. What are we wearing? Something that says, I run this company now, I typed back. The next 2 days passed in a blur of meetings and preparations. I finalized my transition plan, briefed the Westridge team who would be taking over my clients, and carefully selected my outfit for Friday night, a tailored black suit with subtle crimson accents that conveyed authority without trying too hard. On Friday morning, I received a text from Michael, big night for Dad. Wish you could be here. I stared at the message, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Was this an actual invitation, weeks too late? Or just my brother's way of twisting the knife? I'll send a gift, I replied noncommittally. Hours later, Olivia and I stood in the lobby of the Grand Meridian Hotel. The elegant space was filled with Carmichael employees and business associates arriving for the gala, many stopping to greet each other warmly. No one approached us. Ready for this? Olivia asked, squeezing my arm. I took a deep breath. I've been ready for 12 years. We followed the signs to the Carmichael event and approached the check-in table. A young woman with a tablet looked up expectantly. Alexandra Bennett, I said. And guessed. She scrolled through her list, frowning slightly. I don't see, try again, I suggested calmly. I should be on there. After another moment of searching, her expression cleared. Oh, here you are. I'm so sorry, Ms. Bennett. You've been added as a VIP guest. She handed us each a name badge. The reception is through those doors. Dinner will be served at 8. We entered the ballroom, which was elegantly decorated with Carmichael's blue and silver corporate colors. A large banner read, Thomas Bennett, 35 years of excellence. Photos of my father throughout his career were displayed on easels around the room, documenting his rise from junior engineer to director. I scanned them quickly, not a single one included me. There's your mom, Olivia whispered, nodding toward a cluster of people near the bar. My mother stood with Vanessa and her husband, laughing at something someone had said. She hadn't changed much in the 5 years since I'd seen her last, still elegant in her conservative way, hair perfectly styled, wearing the pearl necklace my father had given her on their 25th anniversary. Let's get a drink first, I suggested, steering Olivia toward the opposite bar. As we waited for our champagne, I surveyed the room. Robertson spotted me from across the space and gave a small nod of acknowledgement but maintained his distance, respecting my wishes. Several other board members I had worked with during the transition were present, all carefully avoiding making direct contact. Your father just arrived, Olivia murmured. I turned to see him entering the ballroom, looking distinguished in his tuxedo. At 65, Thomas Bennett still commanded attention, his posture straight, his handshake firm as he greeted colleagues. Michael walked beside him, the resemblance between father and son striking, same build, same confident stride, same easy charm. The perfect heir apparent, or so my father thought. He doesn't know that Michael's department is one of the least profitable in the company, I said quietly to Olivia. One of the first things I'll have to address as president is whether to restructure or eliminate it entirely. Ouch, Olivia replied. Family dinners might get awkward. More awkward than not being invited to your father's retirement party? I countered. We found our assigned table, far from the center of the room where my family was seated. I recognized a few faces, mid-level managers from departments I had reviewed during my consulting work. They seemed surprised to see me. Alexandra Bennett. I introduced myself. Thomas's daughter. Oh, exclaimed one woman. I didn't realize. I mean, I've worked with your father for 15 years, and he rarely mentions. She trailed off, realizing her mistake. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I've been away, I said smoothly. New York. Business consulting. Alexandra's being modest, Olivia interjected. She's a partner at Westridge Partners. She specializes in corporate restructuring and leadership transitions. The dinner proceeded with the expected speeches from longtime colleagues praising my father's dedication, technical expertise, and mentorship. The CEO spoke about Thomas Bennett's contributions to Carmichael's success over 3 decades. My siblings were acknowledged. My name wasn't mentioned once. After the main course was cleared, Robertson approached the podium. This wasn't on the program I had seen. Before we continue with our celebration, he began, I'd like to take a moment to address Carmichael's future. As many of you know, our company has been undergoing a strategic review over the past 2 years, preparing for this leadership transition. On Monday, we'll be making an exciting announcement about our new executive team who will lead Carmichael into its next chapter. Murmurs rippled through the audience. My father looked surprised. This clearly wasn't part of the script he had expected. But tonight is about Thomas Bennett, Robert continued smoothly. And his remarkable legacy at Carmichael. Thomas, would you join me up here? My father made his way to the stage, accepting handshakes and pats on the back as he went. As he took his place beside Robert, his gaze swept the room and landed on me. For a brief moment, his composed expression faltered. Confusion, then something unreadable flashed across his face. Robert presented him with a crystal award commemorating his years of service, and my father stepped up to the microphone to give his remarks. His speech was what I expected, gracious thanks to colleagues, pride in the company's accomplishments, optimism for its future. He acknowledged my mother for her support, praised Michael's contributions to the sales team, and mentioned Vanessa's early years in the accounting department before she left to raise her children. Then, to my surprise, he paused. I'd also like to acknowledge my eldest daughter, Alexandra, who I've just noticed is here tonight. His voice carried a note of uncertainty. Alexandra chose a different path, away from Carmichael and away from Ridgemont. While we haven't always seen eye to eye on her choices, a father can still feel pride in his daughter's achievements. The words hung in the air. Was this an olive branch? Or just public relations? Either way, it was too little, too late. As applause filled the room, Olivia leaned close. The stage is set, she whispered. What's your move? I glanced at my watch. It was nearly time for dessert, after which people would begin mingling again. The perfect moment to make my entrance, or my exit. I need 5 minutes, I said, standing up. I'll be right back. I slipped out of the ballroom and found a quiet corner in the hotel lobby. Pulling out my phone, I called James. It's time, I said when he answered. Release the announcement to the business press. Effective immediately. You sure you don't want to wait until Monday? He asked. I'm sure. I ended the call and checked my email. Within minutes, the press release appeared in my inbox. Carmichael Industries names Alexandra Bennett as new president and COO. I forwarded it to Robert Chen with a brief note, the future starts tonight. His reply came seconds later, understood. Follow your lead? Yes, I typed back. When I returned to the ballroom, I took a moment to compose myself, checking my reflection in a decorative mirror. The woman staring back at me had come a long way from the idealistic graduate who had left Ridgemont 12 years ago, determined to prove that she could succeed on her own terms. I straightened my jacket, lifted my chin, and walked back to the ballroom. As I pushed through the doors, a notification chimed on my phone. The press release had gone live. Within seconds, phones around the room began buzzing as executives received the news alert. Heads turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. And there I stood, framed in the doorway, as the realization began to spread through the crowd. Robertson recovered first, stepping quickly to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, I see that news travels fast in the digital age. Allow me to be the first to officially introduce Carmichael Industries' new president and chief operating officer, Alexandra Bennett. The silence was absolute. Then, from somewhere in the back, a single person began to applaud. Others joined. Hesitantly, then with growing enthusiasm as I walked toward the stage. I passed my family's table without glancing their way, feeling their stunned gazes following me. As I climbed the steps to the podium, I finally allowed myself to look directly at my father. His face had gone pale, his expression unreadable. Was it shock? Anger? Pride? I couldn't tell. And in that moment, I realized it didn't matter. I hadn't done this for his approval. I had done it because it was the right move, for me, for Carmichael, and for all the employees whose livelihoods depended on the company's success. I reached the microphone and surveyed the room, letting the moment settle before I spoke. Thank you, Robert. And thank you all for being here tonight to honor Thomas Bennett's contributions to Carmichael Industries. As his daughter, I've had a unique perspective on his dedication to this company. And as your new president, I intend to build on that legacy while guiding Carmichael into a future that none of us could have imagined when my father joined this company 35 years ago. I paused, meeting the gaze of each board member who had supported my appointment. For the past 2 years, I've been working closely with the board and executive team to develop a comprehensive strategy that will position Carmichael at the forefront of our industry. On Monday morning, I'll be sharing that vision with all of you. But tonight, we celebrate the past that has brought us to this pivotal moment. I turned to my father, who still stood frozen beside Robert Chen. Dad, I said, speaking directly to him for the first time. You always taught me that excellence is non-negotiable. That lesson has guided my career, even when that career took me away from Carmichael, and away from you. I'm honored to continue your legacy, though perhaps not in the way either of us expected. I extended my hand to him, a public gesture. That demanded a response. After a moment's hesitation, he took it, his grip firm as always. The crowd applauded. Ladies and gentlemen, I concluded, please enjoy the rest of the evening. I look forward to working with all of you as we write Carmichael's next chapter together. I stepped away from the podium, aware that every eye in the room was on me. As the orchestra resumed playing and people began to move again, I made my way back to Olivia, who greeted me with a wide smile and a raised champagne glass. That, she said, was magnificent. Before I could respond, my mother appeared at my elbow, her expression a complex mixture of shock and something that might have been admiration. Alexandra, she said softly. We need to talk. My mother led me to a quiet corner of the ballroom, her pearl necklace catching the light as she moved. The controlled composure she had maintained throughout my childhood remained intact, but her eyes betrayed her confusion. How long have you known about this? She asked, her voice barely audible above the orchestra. About Dad's retirement? Since the email announcement went out to everyone except me, I replied. She shook her head. About becoming president of Carmichael. The board approached me 2 years ago as a consultant. The offer to lead the company came 6 months ago. My mother absorbed this information, her fingers nervously adjusting her necklace. And you didn't think to mention it during any of our conversations? I met her gaze directly. When, Mom? During the 2-minute update calls where you tell me about Michael's promotions and Vanessa's children? Or maybe during the holiday gatherings I wasn't explicitly invited to? A flash of guilt crossed her face. We always assumed you were too busy to come home. Your life in New York. You assumed, I corrected her. You never asked. Behind my mother, I could see my father engaged in conversation with Robert Chen, gesturing emphatically. My brother Michael hovered nearby, his expression thunderous. Does this mean you're moving back to Ridgemont? My mother asked, hope creeping into her voice. I'll be dividing my time between here and the New York office, I explained. Carmichael needs a stronger presence in the financial center if we're going to expand. She nodded, processing this new reality where her daughter wasn't just returning, but returning to lead. Your father is surprised. I imagine he is, I said dryly. He's always been proud of you, Alexandra. In his own way. I raised an eyebrow. Is that why I wasn't invited to his retirement party? My mother had the grace to look embarrassed. That was complicated. After what happened at Christmas 5 years ago, when he dismissed my entire career as meaningless. He didn't understand what you did, she defended weakly. And then you left without saying goodbye, and the distance just grew. We didn't think you'd want to come. So instead of asking me, you all made the decision for me, I said. Just like when Dad arranged that management trainee position without consulting me. Just like when he told everyone I was abandoning the family business before I'd even left for New York. Our conversation was interrupted by Vanessa, who approached with the careful poise of someone walking on thin ice. My younger sister had always been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over family tensions with cheerful deflection. Alex, she said, using the childhood nickname I'd long outgrown. This is unexpected. Apparently a common sentiment tonight, I replied. Why didn't you tell us? She asked, genuine hurt in her voice. Why didn't you invite me to Dad's retirement party? I countered. Vanessa exchanged a glance with our mother. We thought, with your history with Dad and the company. You thought wrong, I said simply. But you never seemed interested in Carmichael, Vanessa persisted. You left, built your own life. You missed family dinners, birthdays. Because every time I came home, I was made to feel like the traitor who abandoned the family legacy, I explained. It was easier to stay away than to constantly defend my choices. My sister looked down. I didn't realize it felt that way to you. You didn't ask, I repeated, the phrase becoming my mantra for the evening. Across the room, I saw Olivia, fending off curious questions from other guests. I caught her eye and she gave me an encouraging smile. Our silent communication was interrupted by the arrival of Michael, whose face was flushed with what appeared to be a mixture of embarrassment and anger. Quite the power play, Lex, he said, using the nickname he knew I disliked. Stealing Dad's thunder on his big night. I didn't choose the timing, I replied evenly. The board did. And they chose me to lead Carmichael forward. After I've spent 15 years working my way up, Michael said bitterly. While you were off playing consultant in New York. Playing consultant? I echoed. I was rebuilding failing companies, creating sustainable business models, and developing the expertise that Carmichael needs right now. What exactly have you been doing in sales, Michael? Because according to the numbers, your department has been underperforming for the past 3 quarters. His face reddened further. You've been spying on us? I've been doing my job, I corrected. Analyzing every aspect of this company to determine where changes need to be made. And believe me, changes are coming. The threat hung in the air between us. My mother placed a restraining hand on Michael's arm. This is your father's night, she reminded him quietly. Let's not create a scene. Michael shook off her touch. Dad dedicated his life to this company. He groomed me to take over his department. And now you swoop in and what? Came my father's voice from behind me. Take what you think is rightfully yours? I turned to face him, surprised by his intervention. Thomas Bennett stood tall, his expression unreadable as he studied me. For the first time in years, we were face to face without the buffer of holiday pleasantries or the distraction of other family members. Michael, my father said without breaking eye contact with me, give us a moment. My brother hesitated, then retreated with obvious reluctance. My mother and Vanessa followed, leaving me alone with my father in our small corner of the bustling ballroom. The board never mentioned they were considering you, he said finally. They were instructed not to, I replied. I wanted to evaluate Carmichael objectively, without familial complications. And what did you find? His tone was professional now, a senior executive addressing a colleague rather than a father speaking to his daughter. A company with strong foundations but outdated processes, I answered honestly. Excellent engineering hampered by inefficient sales strategies and narrow market vision. Loyal employees who haven't been given the tools to innovate. My father's jaw tightened. I built that sales department from the ground up. And it served its purpose for decades, I acknowledged. But the market has changed. Carmichael hasn't. So you'll dismantle my legacy? It wasn't a question. No, I said firmly. I'll build on it. Transform it. Ensure that Carmichael survives and thrives for another 35 years and beyond. He studied me, his expression softening slightly. When did you become so formidable? I always was, I told him. You just never saw it because you were too busy looking for a carbon copy of yourself. The string quartet transitioned to a new song, filling the momentary silence between us. Around us, guests mingled and chatted, stealing glances in our direction, eager for signs of family drama. You could have told me, my father said finally. Would you have supported me? He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. Robert tells me you've developed a comprehensive strategic plan, he said instead, changing tack. I have. I'll be presenting it on Monday morning. And my department? What happens to my team? I met his gaze directly. Some positions will be restructured. Others eliminated. But the core engineering expertise you've cultivated will become the foundation of our new product development initiative. He nodded slowly. You've thought this through. For 2 years, I confirmed. A waiter passed with champagne, and my father took 2 glasses, offering one to me. I accepted it, our fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. To Carmichael's future, he said, raising his glass. To honoring its past while embracing change, I countered. We drank, a momentary truce established. Across the room, I could see Robertson watching us with barely concealed interest. I should circulate, my father said. There are people here who've worked with me for decades. Of course. He turned to go, then paused. Your presentation. On Monday, I'd like to be there. I hadn't expected this. You're officially retired as of tonight. Consider me a consultant, he said, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. I might have some institutional knowledge worth preserving. With that, he walked away, leaving me to process what had just occurred. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but it was a beginning, an acknowledgement that perhaps we both had value to offer. Olivia appeared at my side, 2 fresh glasses of champagne in hand. Family reunion going well, she asked. About as well as a corporate takeover usually. Does, I replied, accepting the drink gratefully. Your mother cornered me by the dessert table, Olivia informed me. Asked if you were seeing anyone serious in New York. I laughed despite myself. Some things never change. She also asked if you might consider attending their anniversary dinner next month. One family event at a time, I said. I'm still processing this one. As the evening continued, I circulated through the room, introducing myself to employees I would soon be leading. Many seemed uncertain how to react to me. Was I the prodigal daughter returning, or the ruthless executive brought in to clean house? The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between. Robertson found me as the event was winding down. Quite the dramatic entrance, he commented. The board is pleased, though some were surprised by the accelerated timeline. Better to deal with any fallout now, before I officially take the reins on Monday, I explained. He nodded. Your father seems to be taking it better than expected. For now, I cautioned. The real test will come when changes start affecting his former department. Which brings me to this, Robert said, handing me a sealed envelope. The final authorization for the first phase of restructuring. The board approved it this afternoon, pending your signature. I took the envelope, feeling its weight, not just the paper inside, but the responsibility it represented. Phase 1 included eliminating 30 positions, including 2 in my brother's division. I'll review it tonight, I promised. As Robert walked away, I noticed my father watching our exchange from across the room. Our eyes met briefly before he turned back to his conversation with a longtime colleague. Ready to go? Olivia asked, appearing at my elbow. I nodded, suddenly exhausted by the emotional gymnastics of the evening. We made our way to the exit, stopping occasionally to exchange pleasantries with departing guests. At the door, I felt a hand on my arm and turned. To find Vanessa. Mom wanted me to confirm that you have the address for their new place, she said. They downsized last year, sold the house we grew up in. No one told me, I said, unsurprised. Vanessa had the grace to look embarrassed. There's a lot we haven't told each other, it seems. She pulled out her phone. Let me text you the address. Maybe you could come by tomorrow? Before everything gets crazy with your new position? I hesitated, then nodded. I'll try. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin. Olivia and I walked in companionable silence to the waiting car I'd arranged. So, she said once we were settled in the back seat. President of Carmichael Industries. How does it feel? I stared out at the city lights as we pulled away from the hotel. Complicated. Understatement of the year, Olivia commented. Your family looked like they'd seen a ghost when Robert made the announcement. In a way, they had, I mused. The ghost of the daughter they thought they knew. We rode in silence for a few blocks before Olivia spoke again. What happens Monday? I present my vision for Carmichael's future. Begin the restructuring process. Start rebuilding the company my father helped create. And your brother? His department? I sighed. Michael will have choices to make. He can adapt to the new direction or find opportunities elsewhere. He won't take that well, Olivia predicted. Probably not, I agreed. But this isn't about family dynamics anymore. It's about the survival of a company that employs hundreds of people. Back in my hotel room, I kicked off my heels and opened the envelope Robert had given me. The restructuring plan was comprehensive, detailed, my own work reflected back at me in formal corporate language. At the bottom of the final page was a single line for my signature, the first official act of my presidency. I pulled out my phone and found 3 missed calls, one from my mother, one from Vanessa, and surprisingly, one from my father. There was also a text from Michael, we need to talk. Breakfast tomorrow? I set the phone aside without responding and returned to the documents. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight I needed clarity and focus. I signed the authorization and slipped it back into the envelope. My phone buzzed again with a text from Olivia, you own that room tonight. Don't let the family drama make you forget that. I smiled and typed back, never do. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind racing with preparations for Monday's presentation and replaying moments from the evening. My father's face when he realized I was the new president. My mother's careful neutrality. Michael's barely concealed fury. Vanessa's confused attempt at reconciliation. At dawn, I gave up on sleep and went for a run through the quiet streets of Ridgemont. The town had changed little in the 12 years since I'd left, the same cafes, the same park where I'd spent summer afternoons reading while other kids played sports, the same library where I'd discovered books on business and finance that had shaped my future. I found myself on Maple Street, slowing as I approached the house where I'd grown up. Except it wasn't there anymore, in its place stood a modern duplex, no trace remaining of the colonial-style home with the red front door and the oak tree in the yard where my father had built a swing. They tore it down 2 years ago, came a voice from behind me. I turned to find Mrs. Winters, our former neighbor, walking her dog. She'd aged considerably, but her sharp eyes were the same. Alexandra Bennett, she said, recognition dawning. Well, I never thought I'd see you back. In Ridgemont. Hello, Mrs. Winters, I greeted her. I'm surprised you recognized me. You look just like your grandmother, she said matter-of-factly. Same determined chin. She was a force to be reckoned with too. I smiled, remembering my father's mother who had encouraged my academic pursuits and slipped me business magazines when I was barely a teenager. Your parents sold the house after your grandfather passed, Mrs. Winters continued. Said it was too big for just them with all you kids gone. She peered at me curiously. Are you back for a visit, or? For work, I replied simply. She nodded. Well, don't be a stranger. I still make those snickerdoodles you used to like. As she continued her walk, I stood a moment longer, looking at the place where my childhood home had been. It felt fitting somehow, the physical manifestation of my family's tendency to move on without looking back. To rebuild without preserving what came before. Returning to my hotel, I found Michael waiting in the lobby, dressed casually in jeans and a Carmichael Company polo shirt. His presence was a surprise, I hadn't responded to his text. You're up early, I observed, conscious of my running clothes and sweaty appearance. Couldn't sleep, he admitted. Too much to process. Got your address from Vanessa. I nodded toward the hotel restaurant. Give me 20 minutes to shower. We can have breakfast. 30 minutes later, we sat across from each other at a corner table, the remains of toast and coffee between us. Michael looked tired, the confident salesman persona slipping to reveal genuine uncertainty. How long have you been planning this? He asked without preamble. The board approached me 2 years ago, I explained. At first just as a consultant to assess Carmichael's position and recommend a path forward. And when did it become a coup? I set down my coffee cup. It's not a coup, Michael. It's a necessary transition. Carmichael has been losing market share for the past 5 years. The board recognized that continuing with the same leadership and same strategies wasn't sustainable. Dad built this company, he said defensively. Dad helped build one version of this company, I corrected. But the market has changed. Technology has changed. Consumer expectations have changed. Carmichael needs to change too. Michael leaned back in his chair, studying me. And my department? What happens to sales under your grand vision? I met his gaze directly. Your department will be restructured. Some positions eliminated, others redefined. We need a digital-first approach, not the relationship-based model Dad established in the 1990s. His jaw tightened. And me? Am I being eliminated too? That depends on you, I said honestly. There's a place for you at the new Carmichael, but it would require adaptability, new skills, a willingness to learn approaches that might contradict what Dad taught you. And if I'm not interested in your new approach? Then I'll ensure you receive a generous severance package and excellent references for your next opportunity. Michael laughed without humor. Always the pragmatist, aren't you? No sentimentality, even for family. I'm being pragmatic because sentimentality doesn't keep companies profitable or people employed, I countered. But don't mistake my business decisions for personal ones. I want you to succeed, Michael. I always have. He looked skeptical. You've spent the last decade avoiding us. Now suddenly you care about my success? I avoided the judgment and the disappointment, I clarified. Not you personally. There's a difference. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken family history between us. Did you know they sold the house? Michael asked finally. I nodded. I just found out. Saw the new building this morning. Dad didn't want to, but after Grandpa's medical bills. He trailed off. There was a lot happening here while you were building your career in New York. I would have helped, I said quietly. If anyone had asked. Michael studied me. Would you? You were pretty clear about wanting nothing to do with family obligations when you left. I wanted nothing to do with having my future dictated to me, I corrected. That's different from helping when needed. He seemed to consider this, turning his coffee cup slowly in his hands. Mom wants us all to have dinner tonight. Family only. To process all of this. I raised an eyebrow. And Dad? It was his idea, Michael admitted. Said there are things that need to be said, face to face. I thought about my Monday presentation, the preparation still needed, the calls I should make. But I also thought about the look on my father's face when he'd asked to attend, that mix of pride and uncertainty that had never been there before. Text me the address, I said finally. I'll be there. I spent the afternoon in my hotel room, finalizing my presentation for Monday. The laptop screen glowed with charts and projections, transition plans and market analyses, the culmination of 2 years' work distilled into a vision that would either revitalize Carmichael Industries or tear it apart at the seams. Either way, there would be no going back. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. How's the family reunion planning going? I typed back, dinner tonight. All of them. At their new place. Her response came quickly, need backup? I smiled. Olivia had been offering backup at challenging family events since college. I've got this one. But stay on standby. Around 4, I received an email from Robert Chen with the subject line, Board Statement of Support. Attached was a formal letter signed by all 12 board members, unanimously endorsing my appointment and the strategic plan I developed. It was meant as reassurance, I knew, a reminder that regardless of family dynamics, I had institutional backing for the changes ahead. At precisely 6 o'clock, I pulled my rental car into the driveway of a modest ranch-style home on the outskirts of Ridgemont. The house was nothing like our childhood home, smaller, more practical, with a well-maintained garden that bore my mother's touch and the carefully arranged flower beds. Before I could ring the bell, the door swung open. My mother stood there, looking both nervous and hopeful. You came, she said, as if she'd been half expecting me to back out. I said I would, I replied simply. She ushered me inside, where the smell of my father's famous pot roast, a Sunday tradition throughout my childhood, filled the air. The interior was warm and inviting, with familiar furniture arranged in new configurations. Family photos lined the hallway, and I paused, noticing something unexpected. Amid the images of Michael's sales awards and Vanessa's children, there were several of me. My college graduation. A newspaper clipping about Westridge Partners with my name highlighted. A recent professional headshot I'd had taken for a business magazine profile. Your father keeps a file, my mother said quietly, noticing my surprise. Articles about you, announcements from your firm. He wouldn't admit it, but he's followed your career from the beginning. Before I could process this, Vanessa emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Alex, you're right on time. She embraced me briefly, an unusual gesture for my typically reserved sister. Dad's just finishing up dinner, and Michael should be here any minute. Dad's cooking? I asked, surprised. In our childhood home, the kitchen had been strictly my mother's domain. Retirement hobby, my mother explained with a small smile. He's become quite the chef. As if on cue, my father appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, a dish towel thrown over his shoulder. It was jarring to see him like this, domestic. Relaxed, a far cry from the stern, suit-wearing engineering director I'd grown up with. Alexandra, he greeted me with a nod. Dinner's almost ready. Would you like a glass of wine? The formality in his tone belied the casual setting, reminding me that despite the home-cooked meal and family photos, we were still navigating unfamiliar territory. Wine would be nice, I replied, matching his tone. In the living room, I sat stiffly on an unfamiliar couch, accepting the glass my father offered. My mother perched on the edge of an armchair, filling the awkward silence with questions about my hotel, my flight from New York, anything but the elephant in the room. The doorbell rang, announcing Michael's arrival. He entered with his usual confident stride, though his smile seemed forced. The tension in the room thickened perceptibly. Gang's all here, he said with artificial cheerfulness. Except Paul and the kids, he added, referring to Vanessa's husband and children. Paul took them to visit his parents for the weekend. Vanessa explained, emerging from the kitchen with a tray of appetizers. Thought it might be better if it was just us tonight. Dinner was served in the small dining room, the table crowded with dishes that represented a culinary tour of my childhood: pot roast, scalloped potatoes, green beans with almonds, and my mother's famous dinner rolls. It was a peace offering. Served on china plates, familiar comforts to cushion difficult conversations. For the first 20 minutes, we engaged in careful small talk. My mother inquired about my apartment in New York. Vanessa mentioned her oldest daughter's interest in science camps. Michael described a recent fishing trip with clients. My father remained largely silent, observing the stilted interactions with thoughtful eyes. It was only after my mother served coffee and her apple crumble, another childhood staple, that my father finally spoke directly to the matter at hand. I've been reviewing Carmichael's quarterly reports, he said, setting down his fork. The ones available to shareholders, not the internal ones you've had access to. He looked at me directly. We're in worse shape than I realized. The blunt assessment surprised me. Yes, I confirmed. The public reports don't tell the full story. Which is why the board brought you in, he stated rather than asked. I nodded. Carmichael has been losing market share steadily for 5 years. Research and development has stagnated. Our manufacturing processes are outdated compared to our competitors. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The sales department has met its targets consistently. The targets were too low, I said gently. Set to be achievable rather than ambitious. My father sighed, a sound that contained decades of pride and the dawning of unwelcome realization. I suspected as much in the last few years. Tried to push for more innovation, more aggressive targets. Was told by the executive team that I was being alarmist. They were protecting what they'd built, I observed. It's a common response. When companies reach a certain age, fear of change outweighs the drive to evolve. My father studied me, a new respect evident in his gaze. And your plan addresses this? Comprehensively, I confirmed. New product lines. Streamlined manufacturing. Digital-first sales approach. Strategic acquisitions to expand our technological capabilities. And job cuts, Michael interjected. I met his gaze directly. Yes. Approximately 15% of the current workforce in Phase 1. Another 10% may follow in Phase 2, depending on how successful our transformation efforts are. Vanessa looked troubled. These are people's livelihoods, Alex. Family's dad has known for decades. Which is why we've developed a comprehensive severance and retraining program, I explained. No one will be cut loose without support. But keeping people in positions that no longer serve the company's future isn't kindness, it's delaying the inevitable while burning through capital we need for transformation. My father nodded slowly. She's right, he said, surprising. Everyone at the table. I've seen the writing on the wall for years but couldn't bring myself to make the hard calls. Too many friendships, too many people I'd promised to look after. That's admirable, Dad, I said softly. But it's not leadership, he finished for me. Not the kind Carmichael needs now. The admission hung in the air, a surrender I'd never expected from Thomas Bennett, who had built his identity around being the indispensable cornerstone of Carmichael Industries. What happens to Dad's team specifically? Michael asked, his tone accusatory. The core engineering group will become the foundation of our new product development initiative, I explained. Some positions will be eliminated, others redefined with new responsibilities and skill requirements. And mine? Michael pressed. I met his gaze steadily. Your division will see significant changes. The traditional sales model is being phased out in favor of a consultative, solutions-based approach supported by digital infrastructure. In other words, what I've spent 15 years building is worthless, Michael said bitterly. Not worthless, I corrected. Just not aligned with where the market is heading. The skills you've developed, relationship building, understanding client needs, communicating value, those translate perfectly to the new model. But they need to be applied differently. My father cleared his throat. I'd like to see the full plan before Monday's presentation. The request surprised me. It's quite technical in places. He raised an eyebrow, a familiar gesture that had intimidated junior engineers for decades. I think I can handle it, Alexandra. Of course, I conceded. I'll send you the overview tonight. My mother, who had been quietly observing our exchange, finally spoke. What I don't understand is why all the secrecy. Why not tell us you were consulting for Carmichael? That you were being considered for this position? It was the question I'd been expecting, the one that cut to the heart of our family's dysfunction. Because I needed to evaluate the company objectively, I began. Without familial complications. That's the business reason, my mother pressed. What's the real reason? I set down my coffee cup, choosing my words carefully. Every time I've shared a professional achievement with this family, it's been diminished. My scholarship to Wharton was met with concerns about me moving too far from home. My first promotion at Westridge was overshadowed by Michael's sales award. My partnership was dismissed as just consulting rather than real work. Vanessa looked down, guilt evident in her expression. Michael's jaw tightened defensively. I stopped sharing because it hurt less than having my accomplishments minimized, I continued. And when the board approached me about Carmichael, I knew that telling you would result in accusations of betrayal rather than congratulations for the opportunity. That's not fair, Michael began, but my father raised a hand to silence him. It's entirely fair, he said quietly. We've never given Alexandra reason to believe we'd support her career choices. I've been the worst offender. He looked at me directly. I didn't understand the path you chose, so I dismissed it. That was my failure, not yours. The admission stunned me into silence. In all my planning, all my mental rehearsals for this confrontation, I had never anticipated my father taking responsibility. Your grandmother would be proud, he added, a slight smile lifting the corner of his mouth. She always said you were too big for Ridgemont. I didn't want to hear it then. I'm not too big for Ridgemont, I corrected gently. I'm just built for a different role than the one you envisioned for me. My father nodded slowly. The board chose well, he said finally. Better than they knew, perhaps. The simple validation, something I'd stopped hoping for years ago, landed with unexpected weight. I felt a tightness in my throat and took a sip of water to mask the emotion. So what happens now? Vanessa asked, looking between us. With the company and with us? The company moves forward with its transformation, I said. As for us? I glanced around the table, at these familiar strangers who shared my blood but had become increasingly distant with each passing year. That depends on whether we're willing to transform as well. Meaning? Michael prompted. Meaning we stop pretending the past wasn't painful, I said directly. We acknowledge the patterns that drove us apart. And we decide, consciously, whether we want to build something different going forward. My mother reached across the table and took my hand, a gesture so unexpected I nearly pulled away. I want that, she said simply. I've missed you, Alexandra. More than you know. I have conditions, I said, not unkindly but firmly. Of course you do, Michael muttered, though without real malice. My career is not up for debate or dismissal, I stated. My choices are my own. And my time is valuable, I won't drop everything for last-minute family obligations or show up for events I'm informed about after everyone else. That seems reasonable, my father said, surprising me again. And in return? Vanessa asked. In return, I'll make more effort to be present, I promised. Not just physically, but emotionally. To share what's happening in my life. To listen to what's happening in yours. My father raised his coffee cup. To new beginnings, then. At Carmichael and at home. We clinked cups awkwardly, the gesture both hopeful and tentative. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't even reconciliation in the fullest sense. But it was an opening, a possibility that hadn't existed 24 hours earlier. After dinner, my father invited me into his study, a small room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a worn leather chair that had once sat in his office at Carmichael. On the wall hung framed patents, certificates of achievement, and photographs documenting his rise through the company ranks. I have something for you, he said, unlocking a desk drawer. He removed a small wooden box with the Carmichael logo burned into its lid. This was given to me when I became engineering director. Inside is the first component I ever designed for the company. He opened the box to reveal a small metal part, precisely machined and showing signs of age. It's a pressure valve regulator, he explained. Nothing flashy, but it solved a critical problem in our early hydraulic systems. Been part of every model since 1990. He closed the box and held it out to me. I think it belongs to the company's president now. I accepted the box, understanding the significance of the gesture. It wasn't just a mechanical part he was passing on, but a legacy, one he was finally acknowledging I had the right to inherit and transform. Thank you, I said simply. There's more, he continued, turning to a filing cabinet in the corner. He withdrew a thick folder labeled Alexandra, Professional. Inside were dozens of articles, press releases, and printouts, a detailed chronicle of my career that I had no idea he'd been maintaining. You've been tracking my work all this time? I asked, leafing through the collection. Started the day your first analysis was mentioned in the Wall Street Journal, he confirmed. Didn't understand half of what you were doing, but I knew it was important. Should have told you I was proud. Why didn't you? He sighed, settling into his chair. Pride. Stubbornness. Fear that acknowledging your path meant admitting mine might not have been the only valid one. He looked at me directly. The truth is, Alexandra, you've accomplished more in 12 years than I did in 35. That was difficult to accept. We took different journeys, I said. They can't be compared directly. No, he agreed. But they can be respected equally. I failed at that. Won't make the same mistake going forward. As I prepared to leave, my mother pressed a container of leftover apple crumble into my hands, another childhood tradition that brought an unexpected lump to my throat. Michael offered an awkward handshake that transformed at the last moment into a brief, stiff hug. Vanessa extracted a promise that I would video call her children soon, so they can know their aunt properly. My father walked me to my car, the night air cool against our skin. The silence between us was companionable rather than strained. A new development in our complicated relationship. I'll send you the presentation overview tonight, I promised as I unlocked the car door. I'll be ready for it, he assured me. Then, more hesitantly, the board meeting Monday, my attendance might complicate things for you. I can review the materials privately instead. I considered his offer, weighing the professional implications against the personal significance. No, I decided. I want you there. Not as the former engineering director, but as Thomas Bennett, the first person who taught me what excellence looks like, even if we defined it differently. Something shifted in his expression, a softening. Around the eyes, a slight release of the tension he'd carried in his shoulders for as long as I could remember. Until Monday, then, he said, stepping back as I got into the car. I drove back to the hotel with the windows down, letting the familiar sense of Ridgemont wash over me, freshly cut grass, the river that ran through the center of town, the subtle industrial notes from the factories on the outskirts. It was the landscape of my childhood, simultaneously foreign and intimately known. In my hotel room, I opened my laptop and sent my father the presentation overview as promised. Then I called Olivia, who answered on the first ring. How did it go? She asked immediately. Do I need to post bail? I laughed. No bail necessary. It was unexpected. Good unexpected or train wreck unexpected? Somewhere in between, I admitted. My father's been keeping a file on my career achievements for years. Has every article, every mention in the business press. The same father who told you consulting wasn't a real career? Olivia asked. Skeptically. The very same, I confirmed. Turns out people contain multitudes, especially parents. So what now? Happy family reunions at Christmas? Sunday dinners when you're in town? I sighed, looking out at the Ridgemont skyline, modest compared to New York, but with its own quiet dignity. Now we try to build something new. Not erase the past, but not be defined by it either. And Carmichael? Still moving forward with the restructuring? Absolutely, I said firmly. That's non-negotiable. The company needs transformation to survive. Just like your family, Olivia observed. The difference is, I have full authority at Carmichael, I pointed out. Families are more complicated. No one's really in charge. True, but leadership takes many forms, Olivia said thoughtfully. Sometimes it's having the authority to make changes. Sometimes it's having the courage to be the first one to speak the truth. After we hung up, I returned to my presentation, making final adjustments for Monday's meeting. The future of Carmichael Industries, and in some ways, my family's legacy, would be determined by how well I communicated this vision for transformation. My phone buzzed with a text from my father, reviewed the overview. Ambitious but necessary. 2 technical questions on page 17. Can discuss tomorrow. The message was followed by another, "Proud of you, Alexandra. Should have said it years ago." I stared at the screen, at those simple words that I'd stopped hoping to hear. They didn't erase the years of dismissal and distance, but they created a bridge, tentative and newly constructed, but a bridge nonetheless. I texted back, "Available for breakfast to discuss your questions. And thank you." Setting the phone aside, I returned to my work with renewed focus. Monday's presentation wasn't just about corporate strategy anymore, it was about honoring a legacy while creating space for something new to emerge. In business as in family, the most successful transitions acknowledged the value of what came before while boldly embracing the possibilities of what could be. Outside my window, Ridgemont continued its quiet Saturday night rhythms. The town I'd left behind, the family I'd distanced myself from, the company I was about to lead, all were transforming in ways I couldn't have imagined when I departed 12 years ago with nothing but ambition and determination. The path forward wouldn't be easy. Change never was. But for the first time in years, it felt like all the pieces of my life were finally converging rather than pulling me apart. And that, I realized, was its own kind of success, perhaps the most meaningful kind of all. Monday morning arrived with the clarity that follows a storm. I woke before dawn, reviewed my presentation one final time, and dressed with deliberate care, a tailored charcoal suit, subtle gold accessories, hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. The woman in the mirror looked composed, confident, ready to lead a corporate transformation. Only I knew about the butterflies in my stomach, the mixture of anticipation and apprehension that no amount of preparation could fully quell. Breakfast with my father the previous day had been surprisingly productive. He'd raised legitimate technical questions about the manufacturing restructuring, offering insights from his decades of experience that actually strengthened my proposal. We'd worked side by side for 3 hours in the hotel restaurant, heads bent over spreadsheets and schematics, communicating more effectively than we had in years. When he finally left, he'd squeezed my shoulder, a gesture so uncharacteristic that it had momentarily rendered me speechless. Now, as I drove to Carmichael headquarters, I couldn't help reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment. 12 years ago, I'd fled Ridgemont, determined to prove my worth on my own terms. I'd built a career advising companies in transition, helping them navigate the turbulent waters of change. Yet here I was, returning to guide the very company I'd once rejected through its own transformation. The irony wasn't lost on me. Carmichael's campus looked imposing in the early morning light, four buildings arranged around a central courtyard. The company logo displayed prominently on the main structure. The security guard at the gate did a double take when I presented my newly issued executive credentials. "Ms. Bennett," he said with surprise. "Welcome back to Carmichael." I thanked him, wondering how many other employees would have similar reactions today. News of my appointment had undoubtedly spread throughout the company over the weekend, creating a buzz of speculation and uncertainty. In the executive parking area, I noticed my father's car already in its assigned spot. Despite his official retirement, he was here early, a habit of 35 years not easily broken. The thought both comforted and unnerved me. Robert Chen was waiting in the lobby, immaculate in a navy suit, his expression a careful mix of professional courtesy and genuine warmth. "Alexandra," he greeted me. "The boardroom is prepared. Coffee service has been arranged. Most of the executive team and department heads have already arrived." "And the board members?" I asked, falling into step beside him as we walked toward the elevators. "All present, including the representatives from our Asian markets who joined virtually." I nodded, mentally preparing for the scrutiny I was about to face. "Any last-minute concerns I should be aware of?" Robert hesitated briefly. "Richard Donovan from manufacturing has been vocal about his reservations. And Susan Chen from finance is prepared to challenge the capital allocation for the digital transformation initiative." As expected, I noted. Richard was my father's contemporary, a traditionalist who viewed any change with suspicion. Susan was more progressive but fiercely protective of the company's financial stability. "One more thing," Robert added as the elevator doors opened on the executive floor. "Your brother arrived early. He's requested a brief word before the presentation." I raised an eyebrow. "Did he say what about?" "No, but he seemed determined." I checked my watch. 20 minutes until the official start time. "Where is he?" "Conference room B. I've ensured privacy." "Thank you, Robert." I adjusted my course, intrigued and slightly wary about what Michael might want at this 11th hour. I found my brother pacing the small conference room, his usual sales floor confidence replaced by nervous energy. He wore a crisp suit rather than his typical business casual attire, his expression unreadable as I entered. "Michael," I greeted him. "Robert said you wanted to speak with me." He stopped pacing and faced me directly. I spent all night reviewing your strategic plan. This wasn't what I'd expected. Dad shared it with you? The overview, yes. He ran a hand through his hair, a childhood gesture I hadn't seen in years. It's thorough. Forward-thinking. Exactly what Carmichael needs. I studied him carefully, waiting for the but that typically followed such acknowledgments. I want in, he said instead. Not as the head of traditional sales, but in the new digital commerce division you're proposing. I've been developing a client relationship management system on the side for the past 2 years. It's primitive compared to what you're planning, but it shows I understand the direction we need to go. The revelation caught me off guard. Michael had always been our father's true disciple, following his methods, embracing his perspectives, defending the traditional Carmichael way of doing business. You never mentioned this CRM project, I said. He shrugged, a hint of the old defensiveness returning. Dad thought it was a distraction from our core business model. Said we should focus on what we do best rather than chasing digital trends. But you continued anyway. In my spare time, yes. He met my gaze directly. I'm not as stuck in the past as you might think, Alexandra. I just didn't have the authority to push for change from within. I considered his words, reassessing the assumptions I'd made about my brother's capabilities and vision. This CRM system, is it documented? Tested? Michael nodded eagerly. I've been piloting it with 3 of our smaller clients. Their feedback has been invaluable for refinements. Send me the specs and user data after the presentation, I said. If it aligns with our digital strategy, we could potentially incorporate elements of your work. And my role, he pressed. Let's discuss that after I've reviewed your project, I replied diplomatically. But I appreciate your initiative, Michael. It shows exactly the kind of adaptive thinking Carmichael needs right now. Relief washed over his features, followed by something that looked suspiciously like respect. Thanks for hearing me out. I know our relationship has been complicated. That's one word for it, I acknowledged with a small smile. For what it's worth, he added, heading toward the door, I think the board made the right choice. Don't tell Dad I said that. With that surprising vote of confidence, he left me to gather my thoughts before the main event. I checked my reflection in the glass wall, straightened my jacket, and took a deep centering breath. It was time. The boardroom fell silent as I entered, all eyes turning to assess the prodigal daughter returned as president. The long mahogany table was surrounded by Carmichael's power players, board members, executive leadership, department heads, and key stakeholders. My father sat near the middle, his expression neutral but his posture alert. Michael had slipped in quietly and taken a seat toward the back. Robertson rose to make the formal introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, as announced on Friday, the board is pleased to confirm Alexandra Bennett as Carmichael Industries' new president and chief operating officer. Ms. Bennett brings extensive experience in corporate transformation and strategic growth initiatives. She has spent the past 2 years conducting a comprehensive analysis of our operations and developing the strategic vision we'll be reviewing today. He turned to me. Alexandra, the floor is yours. I moved to the front of the room with measured confidence, connecting my laptop to the presentation system. The Carmichael logo appeared on the large screen behind me, followed by the title of my presentation, Reimagining Carmichael, a Vision for the Next 30 Years. Thank you, Robert, I began, surveying the room. And thank you all for being here today. Some of you have known me since childhood, as Thomas Bennett's daughter who left Ridgemont for New York. Others know me only through my consulting work over the past 2 years. Today, I stand before you as both, someone who understands Carmichael's legacy and someone who sees clearly what must change for that legacy to continue. I advanced to the first substantive slide, a stark graph showing Carmichael's declining market position over the past decade. The data tells a clear story, I continued. While Carmichael has maintained profitability, our market share has eroded steadily as newer, more agile competitors have emerged. Our traditional strengths, engineering excellence, manufacturing, reliability, customer service, remain valuable. But they're no longer sufficient in a marketplace transformed by digital technology, global supply chains, and changing consumer expectations. Richard Donovan from manufacturing shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Susan Chen from finance watched me with analytical intensity. My father remained impassive, though I noticed his slight nod of agreement. The plan I'm presenting today isn't about abandoning what made Carmichael great, I assured them. It's about honoring that foundation while building something new upon it. Think of it as renovation rather than demolition, preserving the structural integrity while creating spaces better suited to today's needs. For the next 45 minutes, I walked them through the comprehensive transformation strategy, the modernization of manufacturing facilities, The shift to digital-first sales approaches, the new product development initiatives, the organizational restructuring, and the financial projections that demonstrated the long-term viability of the plan. This transformation will not be easy, I acknowledged as I approached the conclusion. It will require difficult decisions, new ways of working, and a willingness to embrace uncertainty. Approximately 15% of our current positions will be eliminated or fundamentally redefined in the first phase. Some long-standing practices will be discontinued. Comfortable routines will be disrupted. I paused, making eye contact with key stakeholders around the table. But the alternative is slow decline, watching our market position erode until Carmichael becomes an acquisition target, dismantled for its remaining valuable assets. The room was utterly silent. I advanced to the final slide, a powerful visual showing two possible futures for Carmichael Industries, one declining into irrelevance, the other transformed and ascendant. The choice is clear, I said firmly. But it must be a collective one. This transformation will succeed only if we approach it with shared purpose and commitment. I'm asking each of you to become champions of change within your areas of influence, to explain the why behind difficult decisions, to support your teams through uncertainty, and to maintain focus on the future we're building together. I closed my laptop. Thank you for your attention. I'm now open to questions and discussion. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Richard Donovan cleared his throat. This plan calls for significant capital investment in automated manufacturing systems. What happens to our experienced production staff? It was the question I'd been expecting from manufacturing, direct and focused on the human impact. 3 things, I replied. First, a comprehensive retraining program for those whose roles can evolve to work with the new systems. Second, phased retirement options with knowledge transfer incentives for those nearing retirement age. Third, severance packages with placement assistance for those whose positions are eliminated and who cannot be repositioned within the company. Richard frowned. Some of these people have been with Carmichael for decades. Which is why we're allocating resources to support their transition, I countered. But maintaining outdated processes to preserve specific jobs ultimately puts all jobs at risk when the company loses competitive position. Susan Chen spoke next. The digital transformation budget seems ambitious. What's your contingency plan if development costs exceed projections or adoption is slower than anticipated? The budget includes a 20% contingency reserve, I explained. Additionally, we've structured the initiative in phases, with go/no-go decision points that allow us to adjust course based on actual outcomes rather than projections. Questions continued for nearly an hour, probing, challenging, occasionally skeptical but never hostile. I answered each with data-backed clarity, acknowledging legitimate concerns while maintaining firm commitment to the overall direction. Throughout the discussion, my father remained silent, observing the exchange with thoughtful attention. It was only when Robert Chen began to wrap up the session that he finally raised his hand. Thomas? Robert acknowledged him with evident curiosity. My father straightened in his chair. I've spent 35 years at Carmichael Industries. He began, his voice carrying the weight of experience. Built my career here. Dedicated most of my waking hours to this company's success. He looked around the table, making eye contact with longtime colleagues. Many of you have worked alongside me for decades. You know my commitment to Carmichael's traditional values, engineering excellence, reliability, loyalty to our people. I tensed slightly, uncertain where this was leading. Those values matter, my father continued. They've served us well. But Alexandra is right, they're no longer sufficient. He turned to face me directly. This plan represents our best chance at remaining relevant in a changing marketplace. It honors what matters most, not specific methods or structures, but the fundamental purpose of providing value to customers and meaningful work to employees. I fully endorse it and urge all of you to do the same. The room fell silent again. This public endorsement from Thomas Bennett carrying more weight than any board mandate could. One by one, heads nodded around the table, some reluctantly, others with growing enthusiasm. Robert Chen seized the moment. I propose we move to formally approve the strategic plan as presented, with implementation to begin immediately. All in favor? The vote was unanimous. As the meeting adjourned, people approached me in small groups, offering congratulations, asking follow-up questions, expressing both excitement and apprehension about the changes ahead. Through it all, I maintained the careful balance of authority and approachability that leadership required, aware that every interaction was establishing the tone for my presidency. My father waited until the room had nearly emptied before approaching. Well done, he said simply. You addressed their concerns without compromising the vision. That's no small feat, I learned from watching you, I admitted. You always said that resistance to change is natural but can be overcome with clear reasoning and respect for legitimate concerns. He looked surprised. You were listening. Back then? More than you realized, I confirmed. I may have rejected the specific path you wanted for me, but I absorbed the principles behind it. A faint smile crossed his face. Your way of implementing them is uniquely your own. As it should be, I said. Evolution, not replication. He nodded thoughtfully. What happens now? Now the real work begins, I said. I'll be meeting with each department individually this week, starting with engineering this afternoon. Then we announce the changes to the full workforce tomorrow. That won't be easy, he cautioned. People fear change, especially when it threatens their security. Which is why I'd like you to be there, I said, surprising myself with the request. Not to undermine my authority, but to provide continuity, to show that this transformation builds on Carmichael's legacy rather than rejecting it. He considered this. You're sure? Won't some see it as the old guard looking over your shoulder? Some might, I acknowledged. But more will see it as a symbol of unified leadership. During transition, the past and future aligned rather than opposed. My father extended his hand formally. Then I'd be honored to support you, President Bennett. I took his hand, this professional gesture somehow more meaningful than any embrace could have been. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. As he turned to leave, Michael approached, a flash drive in his hand. The CRM documentation I mentioned, he explained, handing it to me. When you have time to review it. I pocketed the drive. I'll look at it tonight. And Michael, thank you for your support in there. It matters. He shrugged, though I could see he was pleased. Family tensions aside, it's a solid plan. Carmichael needs this. And what about you? I asked directly. Where do you see yourself in the transformed organization? Honestly? He hesitated. I'd like to lead the client solutions team you're proposing, the group that will translate our engineering capabilities into customized applications. It bridges my sales experience with the technical direction we're heading. I studied him, seeing for the first time the potential that had always existed beneath the surface of our rivalry. Submit a formal proposal. If your CRM project demonstrates the necessary vision, you'll be seriously considered. His face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. You won't regret it. Make sure I don't, I replied with a smile. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, calls, and preparations for the company-wide announcement. By evening, I was mentally exhausted but energized by the tangible momentum building behind the transformation initiative. Key executives who had initially seemed skeptical were now actively engaging with implementation planning. The board had issued a strong statement of support to all shareholders. Even Richard from manufacturing had stopped by my temporary office to discuss retraining possibilities for his team. I was reviewing Michael's CRM documentation when my phone rang. It was Olivia. So, she demanded without preamble. How did the corporate conquest go? I laughed, grateful for her ability to cut through the formality. Unanimously approved. Implementation begins immediately. And the family drama? Evolving in unexpected ways, I admitted. Dad publicly endorsed my plan. Michael wants to be part of the digital transformation team. We're finding new ground. Progress, Olivia observed. When are you coming back to New York? I glanced at my calendar, now filled with Carmichael commitments stretching weeks into the future. I'll need to be primarily here for the next month at least. After that, I'll split my time between locations. So you're really doing this? She said. Putting down roots in the place you fled from. Not exactly, I corrected. I'm building something new in a place that has significance. There's a difference. Sounds suspiciously like personal growth, Olivia teased. Don't tell anyone, I replied lightly. It would ruin my ruthless executive image. After we hung up, I stood by the window of my office, looking out over the Carmichael campus as twilight descended. Lights remained on in many windows, people working late, perhaps discussing the changes announced today, wondering what tomorrow would bring. A knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. It was my father. Coat over his arm, clearly on his way out. Still here, he asked. Some habits die hard. Just finishing up, I assured him. Big day tomorrow. He nodded, lingering in the doorway. Your mother wanted me to remind you about dinner on Sunday. Apparently Vanessa's bringing the children. I'll be there, I promised. He seemed about to leave, then hesitated. You know, when I started at Carmichael 35 years ago, my father told me I was making a mistake. Said I should have aimed higher, gone to one of the big coastal firms. This was new information. You never mentioned that. Never saw the point, he said with a shrug. I was determined to prove him wrong, to show that staying in Ridgemont, building something here, had value. You did prove that, I pointed out. In my way, yes. He met my gaze directly. And now you're proving something too, that leaving wasn't rejection, just a different path to the same destination. Which is making a difference, he said simply. Creating something meaningful. Isn't that what we all want, in the end? I considered his words, struck by the unexpected wisdom. I suppose it is. Well, he said, straightening his shoulders, I should get home. Your mother's expecting me for dinner. Dad, I called as he turned to go. Thank you. For today. He nodded once, understanding all that remained unsaid between us. Make us proud, Alexandra. I know you will. After he left, I returned to the window, watching as his familiar figure crossed the parking lot to his car. For decades, Thomas Bennett had been Carmichael Industries to me, representing both the company's strengths and its limitations. Now I saw him differently, not as an obstacle to overcome or a standard to reject, but as part of a continuum, to which I also belonged. Tomorrow, I would stand before hundreds of Carmichael employees and outline the transformation that would reshape their professional lives. Some would embrace the change enthusiastically. Others would resist, clinging to familiar patterns. Most would fall somewhere in between, cautiously optimistic but understandably anxious about what the future held. Leading them through this transition would require more than strategic plans and financial projections. It would demand empathy, clarity, and unwavering commitment to a shared vision, qualities I had developed not despite my complicated family history but because of it. The irony wasn't lost on me. In fleeing Ridgemont and rejecting my father's vision for my future, I had developed precisely the skills needed to transform the company he loved. In returning as president rather than trainee, I wasn't betraying my younger self's ambitions but fulfilling them in a way neither of us could have imagined. I gathered my things and turned off the office light, ready to get some rest before tomorrow's challenges. As I walked through the quiet hallways of Carmichael headquarters, I felt a sense of rightness, not the triumphant vindication I might once have expected, but something deeper and more sustainable. I had left Ridgemont to prove my worth on my own terms. I was returning not in defeat but in strength, bringing with me the experience, perspective, and courage needed to build something new from the foundations of the past. Family relationships, like corporate transformations, didn't change overnight. There would be setbacks, misunderstandings, and moments of frustration in the days ahead. But for the first time in years, I felt genuine hope that both Carmichael Industries and the Bennett family could evolve into something stronger and more authentic than before. Sometimes the most powerful form of leadership isn't dramatic disruption, but thoughtful integration, honoring what came before while creating space for what might be. Sometimes the bravest act isn't walking away from difficult relationships but returning to them with new strength and perspective. And sometimes the most meaningful success isn't proving others wrong but finding unexpected common ground in shared purpose. As I drove away from the Carmichael campus that evening, I understood that my journey had come full circle, not ending where it began, but transforming both the place and myself in the process. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, I wasn't traveling it alone. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.